So today we are in workshop 1, the Jumpstart workshop 1. The reason it's called Jumpstart is like any vehicle which is stuck. All you need is a jump start to make it work. So today we all are stuck for various reasons. And we all will come out of it, but at some point we might feel slightly isolated, lonely, what's happening around us, anxiety, etc. So this webinar series will provide you the Jumpstart pack for you to kickstart your career if you believe that's a slightly slow down. But for most of you, I strongly believe that you are already in the good place. So today we'll start with sales prospecting and sales pipeline management, because that's the first part of overall bid lifecycle, predominantly start from there. I thought it's important for us to have some grips on that. So as I mentioned, the information that I'm going to share for the next 30 odd minutes, 35, 40 minutes will be foundational, but it's also comes with some core content that you can also start to apply in your day-to-day work life as well. So what is the sales process? So all I want you to do is just to don't take notes, just use this as a reflective session, because I'll be sending you the slides, I'll be sending you the template, and I'll also be sending you the guide. Okay, so use this session as a reflective session to understand how in your company the whole sales stroke bid process works. And that's where things start to get interesting. So maybe at the end of the session, it'll be good to kind of reflect on those things and see how we can apply that to an individual organization. So predominantly, in a very generic way, these are just kind of 7 stages of sales process that works. In my company, we call it laps. The sales process has 7 steps, starting from prospecting, which is what today we'll touch, then preparation, approach, presentation, handling objections, closing, and following up. So preparation and approach is part of, we will touch, that's part of pipeline thing, which we will touch. Presentation is the topic for Thursday this week, and we'll gradually move to the other elements. So what that meant is, you will start to get feel for more how the salespeople work, and also the how sales process work. And if there's an opportunity to do business development for your company, this kind of ideally helps you to build that knowledge base. So today we are here to do prospecting. So prospecting as a word, as it mentions, it's like you are in search of a potential customer or a client. Before you bid, you do need to know who you're going to work with. And that person, it depends on whether you are approaching it as a B2B, which is business to business, or B2C, which is business to customer. In our case, if I assume that you are a Scribble customer, then you know what, it's B2C. So that's prospecting. So you are here because you might have listened to me, you might have seen some of the emails or LinkedIn posts, etc. That's prospecting. But if it's a company, that becomes a tender. Your prospect becomes a company, and the opportunity becomes a tender. So so predominantly prospecting is a process of searching for potential customers, clients, or buyers in order to develop new business. So without going into, it's all written there, and every company has its own funnel of how the whole thing works. Because if you look, you might be listening to lots of talk about bid, no bid qualification and stuff. That's like you already qualified a customer and you're deciding whether you want to bid or not. This is much more behind, much more before. So you just know a person. Say, I know Samya, I know Mano, and Ajay, Claire. So you know what? So that's the relationship. So your whole prospecting starts with relationship. Predominantly, it could be lead or it could be a prospect. So lead become a prospect if they are qualified as potential customers. Otherwise, a person or a business is a lead. So that's the important variation. What it means is whose responsibility of generating leads. In a large company, the responsibility of generating leads sits with the marketing team, and the responsibility of converting leads to prospects sits with the sales team, and the responsibility of converting the prospects into bids sits squarely with our community. That's the overall thing. But if you're a founder of a startup company, or if you're a small business company, you are this one-man sales stroke marketing stroke bid person, which means that's where it gets interesting for people. So how are you going to convert lead to prospects and prospects to bids? That's what we'll be going for in this 12 Jumpstart workshop. So we do have marketing, we do have capture, we do have sales, and then obviously we do have proposal element. So yeah, so moving on. The characteristics of a good prospect depends on your company. This will be the first little exercise that you can look what type of business is your company targeting and why? And why are they looking for that sort of companies? And in that sort of companies, what are they looking for? It's like, what should be the minimum kind of qualification that your sales guys are looking for in a relationship? So if they come out voluntarily and say, as a company, hey, we are looking for X service, we are doing a transformation, we are investing on technology. What that meant is those are trigger points that these companies are looking for a transformation partner. When they're moving to transformation, there are much more touch points that you could go for, and you can look into who are the relationship in those companies that you already have, reach out with them through LinkedIn. We will touch on LinkedIn conversations some point in the Jumpstart workshop, and we'll gradually start to build that relationship. So these are 3 or 4 things. These are part of the sales cycle, which is okay, you're building relationship with somebody. This is good, best prospect. So if I am a customer, okay, I am the owner of Baachu, I have the credit card and I have the budget control. So if anybody convinces me, they straight away get the authority for me to buy and spend. But in a corporate company, that doesn't work like that. You need to build relationship with an influencer. The influencer takes you to a buyer, and then the influencer sells you a service or product to the buyer inside the company, and then purchase order, invoicing, and then it goes all the way. So predominantly, the important point here is, what are the characteristics of a good prospect? Ideally, person whom you're meeting will also be the person who also have the budget. So that's the best case scenario. But the more bigger companies you target, that's not always the case. So if you look in our cycle, sales, marketing, and business development cycle, very, very often you will find marketing people controlling the sales and the BD budgets. Again, check in your company whose cost center or whose profit center do you sit. If it's sales and marketing, normally marketing has a hold on it. So that's what we find it interesting most of the time, which means our buyer, which is marketing, doesn't do bids, but their focus is generating leads. I understand in your company, exercise 2, who holds the purse. Then we keep on moving. Again, part of the overall thing is, yes, this person should have the authority, this person should have the budget, but is there a sense of urgency? Why? Because you can't keep on building. There are, in some cycle, it will take up to 2 years for you to convert from the time you make the relationship in the word you actually close the deal. You cannot sustain in that way. And we kind of, we have another company called Baachu Rain. Our lead cycle is 6 months. Sometimes it's up to 2 years because we specialize predominantly in sales pipeline generation. So what it meant is it takes a long cycle for us to have that 4 thing, which is like know me, like me, trust me, and buy me. So the 4 things happens in its own time. You can reflect on your whole thing today. You are coming and listening to me in this talk because some way or the other, I might have touched you on the 4 element. That's why you're giving 1 hour of your time to me listening to this. So it's similar to your client as well. If somebody gives you a meeting, you need to go with it other than urgency, where, okay, I'm in need of urgency and I Google searched you and I find you right on the top, I buy you, boom, gone. But in most cases, you need to go through this cycle. So prospecting is the first stage of building that trust. So otherwise, if you are in the cycle of who's the sponsor? Does he have the authority? Does he have the budget? Is he sense of urgency? Bingo, that's your best good prospect. So again, look into your company, the tenders that you have put forward. 2 things. Number 1, in your company, who are the sponsors who have the budget for you? And secondly, in your prospects, speak to salespeople and say predominantly, who do they believe as prospect? And how often does the prospect have the budget themselves? And how is it whole thing works? That's how we gradually learn. So next. So this is an interesting question as it turns, who should be doing the prospecting? Because in the new normal, believe me, I think things will start to change because the pressure will be on for everybody to do everything. It's because 3 months of slowdown means many corporates, many SMEs are struggling with cash, or they might go under, and the economy will be going recession or stance, because we are not prepared for this cycle. 3 months, no action, suddenly we get all the cash, because everybody are now going through a phase of restart, then they recreate or reinvent. So what that meant is prospecting will be even more interesting in the coming year, especially late 2020, early 2021 in the post-COVID world. So who's going to do the prospecting? As I already mentioned, it's going to be founders. In my case, it's me, or it could be sales reps if it's a smaller company or a mid-cap company up to 50 million pounds, or if it's a larger company, then you have business development, which is the word means that BD people are sales plus BD people together is BD people. So as they kind of do both the inbound prospecting and the outbound prospecting. I'll touch what's inbound and outbound the next few slides, but that's where we are in. So again, who should be doing the prospecting dependent entirely on the company's needs. So in some cases these days, managing directors, operations directors, finance directors, everybody will be chipping in what do they do, how do they know. So if you decide to become a prospect, now this is called, we are entering what we call a pre-sales domain, pre-sales strategic research domain here. So before the salesperson or the marketing person reaches out, there need to be a lot of research, what we call your customer avatar. Who's the person whom I'm going to target? And is there anybody whom I'm going to look? If you look Facebook, you will find enough ads that's coming to you because somebody has tagged you because you liked something. That's a basic B2C marketing. So what's your likes, what's your attributes, which age group, which demographics, which geography, everything they do the profiling, especially if it's B2C. In a B2B, in more or less, that's what they do, but at a much larger scale, provided who has a budget, etc. So predominantly prospecting or the pre-sales function, this is what they expect you to do. You do need to know how to identify the customer, understand your own product knowledge, and predominantly build up the buyer persona. That's it. But in most cases, it's going to be trial and error, because if I know, say, Claire, and if I go and find, okay, I want to know all the people like Claire, then I could find it through LinkedIn. I can find it through Facebook. I can find it through Twitter, because rated pages are there. So all you need to do is just to find who your current customer avatar is, and you can map the others, not as of in the old days where it's pretty challenging. So how are we normally doing that? Okay, now I identified who my customer avatar is. I have a rough idea of prospect. How am I going to reach out to them? Outbound prospecting, which is like cold calling. You would see, your team might do that, or you might have a pre-sales team, or you might not have a pre-sales team, or even you receive that yourself. Cold emailing, cold calling, social media prospecting, something coming from LinkedIn. Then once it comes through, then you also have warm emailing and social selling. So outbound prospecting and inbound prospecting is a slight variation in it, because outbound is predominantly cold. You don't know the person. So all you're trying to do is just to familiarize yourself, your know me and some of your like me arena. Whereas gradually you're moving into this part, which is warm emailing and social selling, which is like you start to like that person's post. You start to follow a person, you start to follow a company, then you start to manage it. So which means you're gradually moving from cold to warm to hot. So that's, and then as I mentioned, if you have one customer, remember in every tender you have reference. And the reason they ask reference is because, okay, if you have delivered this service, you might be good because my company is similar to that. In most cases, you would, as a company, ask your own referrals if you do net promoter score and other type of initiatives to manage your customer satisfaction. Those are the things that's going to build up on your whole external sources and internal sources. So some of the information that you can do to build up the prospecting is this. It could look like technical, but in a very simple way, you just need to know one person, and from the one person to one company, and from one company to many companies. It's as simple as that. So before we move into the pipeline arena, let's look at some of the prospecting mistakes. So what happens is sometimes you just go in good old times, because we have GDPR and other things. What people used to do is they just buy the list from other companies. Like Salesforce has its own list, which you can buy from Salesforce and add it into Salesforce. They sell it. So there are so many data companies, all the forms that you are adding when you're booking airlines, when you're booking so many travel websites, they all are coming to a central repository, and it's all being shared to people. So what that meant is your pipeline tend to be overloaded with unwanted leads. That's how you start, and then you gradually qualify. It's is outdated. And that approach meant like you're going to annoy more people than you're going to actually win the hearts of few people. So it's not the right approach, but still people tend to do that, which means you have too many prospects in the pipeline. And then when people don't respond to you, might assume that they're not interested. And some of the questions are slightly subjective, which I am notorious of doing myself, which is speaking too fast and not listening that much. Again, this is like you've already started when you're cold calling and stuff, or when we're even having conversations with people. These are all some of the mistakes. So if you're moving on the other side, it's still coming to like, okay, you didn't qualify your buyer profile properly. And suddenly, remember there is a journey, and you might get excited and tell them, hey, you know what, we can do everything, even though you are not the right person to promise. You might overpromise. And then, as I mentioned, without you knowing what they want, you just open up your slide deck and then send them your brochure or your sales deck. Yes, this is what we do. Our features, look at it, how great it is. And then imagine you might realize that your sponsor is not actually the buyer. So you might treat them, okay, this person. So the notorious thing is personal assistants. You might underestimate personal assistants. Managing director or your sponsor is the lead person, but you might treat your gatekeepers badly, and you will come and have it burnt in the later part. These are some of the prospecting things. When you start to do it, you will learn, and you will kind of go through that. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to open for any questions. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I would continue. Do you have any questions, Soumya or Mano?
No, sir.
No.
Okay. So yes, perfect. So let me go through the next one. So now we have the sales pipeline. And now what happens is, okay, you are qualified, you have met, and people are pretty happy that you have done the high-level presentation, but now they're saying, okay, we would like to work with you. Good. So at some point between, as I mentioned, between the leads to prospect, you will add that information into your pipeline. Pipeline, we will touch what a pipeline is a first step that you actually started to get closer to your customer. So this is where your cold calling person or anybody in the pre-sales team will decide, hey, you know what, I had an interesting chat with this person, and he or she ticks these 3 or 4 things for me, and I'm going to add him to the Salesforce portfolio. Then the salesperson then start to pick it up, and he'll be running it. So predominantly what it meant is you will have some information of your prospect added inside the pipeline. Then you bid, then you win, then you mobilize and you operate. This is a tender-driven scenario. If you are operating in a tender scenario, from the interest, they have asked you to submit a tender. This is how the whole journey works. You all know how it works. And next, your pipeline is not just about new opportunities, right? You are not always going to look at prospects that are outside. You might have worked with few people inside. You might have partners. You might have other people. So your pipeline is also dictated by your organization's top line or bottom line growth. What do I mean by that? Your company might decide, like, in the next 3 years, we want to move from, say, 30 million pounds to 100 million pounds. That's aggressive growth. If they sit and tender for opportunities, and again, it's quite interesting, go and check what's the average value of a tender in your company. Let's assume your average value is 1 million pounds, and you're bidding 3 opportunities and you're winning 1, which means you should bid, say, 30 million opportunities and you will win 10 million. So that's 30 opportunities a year. Even with 30 million new wins, your revenue will only move from 30 million to 40 million. This is like you're operating with the current cycle. That's where then you started to think, okay, I want to extend my market. I want to go for new opportunities outside my geography. I want to look at new opportunities where I'm going to partner with people. I want to look at new opportunities where I'm going to subcontract for others, which we'll touch as we speak. So pipeline will then start to become more mixed of what type of customers you want to work with. It won't be the same type of customers. You will start to change it depending on your growth ambitions of the company. So predominantly a pipeline is a list of opportunities, but it could vary all the way. Or you might decide, you know what, your pipeline will also include acquisition targets if you are starting to look into acquisitions. So anyway, moving on, what are some of the components inside the pipeline? So you, this is, you already qualified a pipeline. Okay, your sales, now you know who the lead is, you have built a relationship, and the relationship has asked you to say, hey, you know what, this is the contact details of the person, this is the company name, this is their website, these are some of the sponsors inside, influencers inside, all those information goes in there, and then your opportunity details. Then they say, hey, you know what, we are inviting you to come for tender. These are the information that your pipeline will have. So again, go and check what your company calls as pipeline, or what your company uses in sales reports. It's going to be very interesting. In a large company, this is what they do. It includes opportunity name. This is the customer name. The opportunity could very well be, again, opportunity and customer will be slightly different, because if your customer is based in different geography. So say, for example, your opportunity will be providing shared services to Wipro, for example. So your customer is Wipro and your opportunity shared services. But then you decide we are going to provide ICT services to Wipro. Again, your opportunity is ICT services, your customer still is Wipro. So gradually your pipeline will become dense in a way, like what are the opportunities that we have done for Wipro? Or what are the opportunities that we have done similar to shared services? You can filter it and you can go for that. Incumbent, again, these are some of the information that we go for, which is like, what's the opportunity name? What's the customer name? What's the customer thing? And who's the incumbent who's currently running it? When was this published in the domain? When do we need to submit it? When are they going to award? When is the contract going to start? And when is the contract going to end? What's the total contract value, the TCV, and what's the annual contract value? The weighted bid value is another thing, which is just a slight technical term, which is like, okay, you know what, depending on the average award, and depending on when you start the contract, the weighted bid value slightly changes. So P-go is probability of happening, and P-win is a probability of winning, and P-go is, P-win is a probability of winning, P-happening is a probability of happening, and P-go is, it's your own internal metric that says, you know what, what's the percentage that you're going to go for that approve, to take it to approval. In most companies, it's normally P-win and P-happen. So then these are internal elements, depending on how big is your company, which business unit, which geography, which bid stage. So this is where your pipeline gets slightly dense. So now, studying the numbers, as I mentioned, is pretty important. So what's more important in the pipeline element is there are two key factors in pipeline. There is a pipeline masterclass that we'll launch, that's scheduled in the live workshop thing, which we'll delve deeper. But in general, it's important to understand your sales cycle. As I mentioned, if it takes for me 6 months to 2 years to convert a project, or in some cases it might take 1 month, there is a cost associated with this. As I mentioned here, in a very simple email, you say, hey, hi there, this is what we do. Will you be interested to work with us? Kind of a thing, all the way to you sign a deal. It takes a long time. So it's important to understand what's your company's sales cycle is and what's your company's sales close rate is. The bid win rate is slightly different to the sales close rate. As I mentioned, we are not in the bidding domain here. We are in the selling domain here. What that meant is, what percentage of people you make initial contact, which eventually buy. So the very first time you send an email to a prospect, and that prospect gets converted into an opportunity, and an opportunity then converts into a tender. Normally, people will be very good in saying, from that opportunity to tender, I have a win rate of 30%. But if you take one step back, it's like, how many relationships should I build to get that opportunity, and how many opportunity then converted into bid? Your number will look far less. So, but again, the success criteria for you as a bid and proposal professional will be between the time you start tender to the time you close. Whereas the success criteria for a pre-sales professional will be like, I built the relationship and then I added the relationship into a proposal. That's my success. And the success criteria for a salesperson will be somewhere between taking that relationship and converting all the way through. So everybody will have the same thing. So in my company, we call it laps, which is like, okay, every week we need to reach out to 50 people, right? And every week we are reaching to 50 people, and every month we need to schedule 3 meetings. And in every 3 meetings, we just need to convert a project, because in our case, we don't do multi-million projects. Our projects are average between 10,000 to 25,000 pounds. So that's the whole cycle, how it works. So that's what we call laps, which is like how many calls do you make? How many meetings have you scheduled? How many meetings have been converted into sales presentations, and from sales presentation to actual invoicing and purchasing order? So in a very small scale, if you're not going for tender, this is how it works, right? So you just go build a relationship. They ask you, okay, you know what, we are not going to go for tender because it's very small value. Let's begin the journey. Let's start the work. So go and look back in your company. What is your laps? What is your sales cycle is? And also understand from your sales team what is the sales close ratio is, because those will be an interesting metric in addition to your overall bidding cycle. So now let me make the slide slightly big so that you can start to feel. Okay, so what happens here is, as I mentioned, there are 3 elements that forms part of your company's growth. So we call it R and A, where R is rebids. These are the opportunities that's already outsourced in the market. So you are merely trying to displace somebody else, or you are merely trying to retain what you already have got. New business, because of coronavirus crisis, you might get some new opportunities. So those are new business, which has been outsourced for the very first time. Then you have acquisition. Together, these 3 elements form part of your growth. R plus N plus A is equals your target growth. So again, in your company, try to understand, acquisition might be a bigger element, but try to understand how many of the opportunities are renewal, which means it's already been outsourced in the past. A quick test will be, do you know the incumbent? If you know the incumbent, then that's rebid. If you don't know the incumbent, then find the incumbent. But if it's an entirely new project, it's a new project. What's the proposition of how much of your growth is coming from R or N or A? It's a question that you might need to look for. So when you're building a pipeline, this is how you gradually build the pipeline. So we look into 5 different elements. So rebid opportunities, those are quick, dirty wins. It's already been outsourced. Tell me who's running it. Let's try to target them. Greenfield opportunities, this is where your relationship comes up, N1, N2, N3, entirely new way of working here. So your leads to prospects, your prospects to opportunities kind of come here. Sometimes you might say, I can do it myself, which is block 2. Sometimes you might say, hey, you know what, we better partner with somebody. Sometimes we will say there is not even a market here. You are finding, or you are going to find more and more companies trying to do this market shaping, because that's what is going to happen in the post-COVID. So in your company, identify what they are doing now, which is going to be pretty interesting. Ideally, people need to start to shape the market from now, and they need to keep hold of what they got. Anything here is, again, depending on how much they want to grow, but they need to make a lot of noise on shaping, opportunity creating, because people don't know what they want now, because everybody is putting heads down trying to survive, whereas rebid is keeping your cost down and trying to find. So again, in your company, how do they do things? So these are some of the questions which we'll touch when we do the pipeline workshop. The question here is, in which block generate discipline growth and why? I might ask you out, but now I won't be, because it's an introductory workshop. In the pipeline workshop, I will ask you. Keep the question in mind. I'll revisit. So when in a snapshot of pipeline, this will be the template that will be shared with you part of the workshop. Okay, here we go. My block, which is like, this is a rebid, this is a new bid. and this is a subcontractor bid, and this is a new opportunity that's going to come and hit the market, and then this is our acquisition target. So some of the elements here, when it's going to be awarded, when it's who is running it, total contract value, average contract value, when the revenue is going to start, which stage of the bid it is. If you have a bid governance in your company, look which stage, how they are classifying the opportunities. That's another way. It's a very interesting thing that you can look into. How are they allocating resource to a bid? That's another thing that you might look. Are they allocating Chris because Chris is a domain expert, or they're allocating Chris because Chris is available? How are they evaluating the probability of happening? If you ask any salesperson, he or she will normally say, hey, this is definitely happening, so I want to have the best resource. But ask him, how is he calculating the P-win? Because not all opportunities, as I mentioned, will be converted. Not all relationship will be converted into meetings, and not all meetings will be converted into presentations, and not all presentations will be converted into tenders. So the P-go is a very arbitrary number. It changes as we go. But once you kind of go with the tender, how are they changing it? 10%, 15% on what basis? Again, it's something that you can look into. The weighted average is nothing but the multiplication of, it's going to be 20 million. And 20 million is what we are going to do. 50% is the chance of happening, 10% is the chance of winning. So it's simply 80 into 50 into 10, and then it becomes 4. So that's the number. So what that meant is when you're adding your sales pipeline, if you start to own the pipeline, people need to say, where are you with the pipeline? So it's a weighted average. So depending on these numbers and depending on this number, you can say, hey, I'm still on target, which means if you miss the first opportunity, you can go and add more in the pipeline to get it done. So again, as I mentioned, there are multiple ways of measuring your pipeline. And the reason why we need to do what we need to do is here. So A, it's a guide, and B, it's a tracking mechanism, and 3, it also helps you to manage your organization's performance. So there are 3 different things, as you mentioned. One is operations, how the whole thing is structured from start to end in your company. Have a look, who's doing the pre-sales, who's doing the sales, who's doing the marketing, who's doing the bidding, and who's actually mobilizing and who's actually running it. So depending on the structure, depending on the metrics, you just change your overall structure. Again, BD process is the same end to end. Again, BD projects is the way you choose your opportunities. I've given 3: strategic bids, large core bids, incremental growth bids. Strategic bids is a must-win, massive, high-value bid. Large core growth is, as I mentioned, this is your N1 type of project, which is you are only doing this because you already specialize in this. It's just new, but it's big. Incremental growth is, these are little churn opportunities that you are not actually going to go for tenders, but quick churn opportunities that you want to go for. And the measuring, again, look how you are measured for your own success, and how your team is measured for success, and how your organization is measured for success. So that's how the whole thing works. So predominantly, it's very important because your culture of the organization will depend on how you're measured. If you have a solid bonus scheme, which entices your salesperson or anybody on the top, he or she might be bidding and winning all the opportunities that you shouldn't bid and win, which means your company might be losing that. How is your performance managed, and how is your behavior managed, and how is the overall remuneration managed? With the new COVID scheme, more or less everybody's salary and package will be bonus, will be curtailed, but the impact of that will be very interesting to see in the new information. So it depends on, again, in your company, have a look, how do they capture this information? In a smaller company like us, we use Excel and we use some CRM tools, basic CRM tool, Pipedrive. But in your company, what do they use? Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics. Again, ask why. What's the reason? Just because everybody's using it, are they using it? Or is it something that they genuinely wanted to use? Again, having an understanding of that helps. Because why? Because in the post-COVID thing, many companies will be trying to restructure. When they try to restructure, guess what they do? When they decide to change their strategy, their whole Salesforce or the whole CRM needs to be rebuilt. So having an understanding of sales process, having an understanding of bid process might help in you to do this sort of project management type opportunities as well. So again, there'll be so many sales restructure opportunities that will be coming and hitting in the market soon. depending on the size and type of projects. This is how we do. And as I already mentioned, some of the metrics that they use here, it depends whether you are in which stage of a bid. When during the bid, of course, your salesperson will be saying, hey, how many opportunities do you have on the sales funnel? What's the total value of your opportunities? And the different stages of your bid, how many are there? What's the value of opportunities per stage bid, and what's the weighted bid value? And what's the status of the top must-win bids? Again, look into your corporate governance pack or your company's governance pack. What is your sales lead or your team's lead taking it to the board? Why is it written that way? Why they believe that that's the right thing to share, to providing update to their own customer, which is their board, and bits and pieces. So when this is happening, you also have after bidding. Sorry about the font there, I'll move it back. So now, in addition to that, how many opportunities are won or lost, value of opportunities won or lost, your win rate, capture ratio, and the revenue gap for current and next 2 years. Because there is an important word called forward order book. Forward order book kinds of tells you, okay, I have won enough projects this year, means my next year's target, 50% of my next year target, I've already achieved it. There's a less pressure on the sales and bid team because you have done really well this year. But for most companies, it's going to be challenging next 3 years because you all will be having revenue gaps. So again, having an understanding of the revenue gap, this is where then you will start to decide, you know what, let's go and partner with somebody and do different type of bits. You know what, let's go and acquire. If you do have cash, which is going to be pretty rare in this case, you'll just go and do it. Win rate and capture ratio are the same. I will leave it to you to define what win rate and capture ratio is, because you both are bid professionals. Yeah, I'll ask you once the session finished. So next one is how the choice of metrics. Again, you don't need to choose everything. You can just choose what's suited for your company. You don't need to overcook it. Just pick up the 5 important things and you just pick what's relevant, whether that helps you in managing and measuring the performance of your company. So we look at the pitfalls. The pitfalls is your pipeline is a dynamic tool. Your pipeline changes all the time. The relationship changes from the very top. The person whom you build the relationship might have moved to a different company, so you need to change the contact name. The opportunity that you have bid for, you might have lost, so you might need to change it. Opportunity you might have bid, but the value of the opportunity that you have bid is different. So pipeline is a full-time job in itself. So in your company, see who manages the pipeline and understand how data is being input into the pipeline and how the data is also managed in the pipeline. So understand what metrics you are using and understand what type of opportunities are being used as well. And most importantly, as I mentioned, how is the overall growth journey being tracked in your company? From then on, most people, this is another thing which I hear, your pipeline is not confidential as you think. Because if you go and ask your salesperson, he'll say, no, it's too confidential. It's not, because he or she is trying to just cover himself because it's bonus or other thing depends on it. And that straight away tells you it's a very bad or a kind of, I wouldn't say unethical type of thing. At the end of the day, his remuneration or her remuneration is based on that. But simple terms, his pipeline is not confidential as you think. So because what you don't know is you might never know that you might have somebody, not just in your team, but in some other team who might know that company, who might know someone in that company. So by sharing, hey, I'm planning to bid for the thing, I'm planning to bid for this, might help you. Certain aspects of pipeline is confidential, obviously your margin and the other elements, but most of the information is publicly available anyway. So it's about what's your high level principles of managing your thing. So going back, pipeline again is a structured list of opportunities that we mentioned, and what the opportunities is entirely depends on your company. Have a look. What are the tools that you use to measure the performance and the growth factors, as I mentioned, which is the culture of your company, and what are the different types of opportunity that they're doing. And most importantly, you build your growth blocks based on your growth factors, which is predominantly what's the profit, what's the revenue, and what are the other elements that you're looking for. So this is where we are with sales prospecting and sales plan management. I thought I'll share as much as I can on the first webinar. If you have any questions, let me know. I will unlock. Oh, let me close it. Right. So, any questions, Soumya? Mano?
No, as of now, no.
Okay, there was a noise there. Okay, Soumya, you?
Nothing much from my end also.
Did I overload your work on a festive day?
Not like that.
Perfect. So